Here we are.
Clap every time.
Gotta have
everybody's got to have the clap every now and then.
Penicillin will get rid of that.
Yeah. Well, modern medicine.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chase.
All right, everybody,
But seriously, folks.
welcome
Seriously?
to the Should Run with Gas podcast.
And this is the one you've all been waiting for.
Podcast.
That was cool.
Yeah. We are at Cool Spring again.
Cool Spring, Pennsylvania.
We're
Cool
sorry.
Spring, no S.
No S.
No S.
Here we go
Just
down
like
that road.
Myrick Eclipse. It's Myrick.
Myrick.
Myrick is the correct pronunciation. Myrick. Anyway.
I went to high school in Kentucky. I had to argue that point.
Yeah. So we have some special
Well,
guests.
we are in the library of
Well,
Cool
yeah,
Spring.
yeah.
This is the house that holds all the information of the world and internal combustion and God knows what else is in here. But this is a phenomenal library of collection for gearheads.
Yeah, for the 5 of you that are watching the video, we're surrounded by books. I know, bad, but
They got
they have
pictures.
pictures, so they're pretty good for that. I actually see a couple that I actually have, that Oil Well and that National. I got a couple like that. So
Anyway.
you were saying earlier that Okie Moffat had a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, correct. That after Oki passed away, they were looking for something to do with these. They had, if you can see around here, there's a tremendous collection of books, a lot of technical books. Oki was into engineering. He was into music machines, organs, just a wide variety of books were in this collection. And gracefully, his son donated them to the museum and allowed us to bring the bookcases up. Mark Gottschall and I forget who else. Maybe Gordon Jones actually went down to West Virginia to bring all this stuff up in several trips.
It's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, I wish Okie was still around. It was kind of an unfortunate deal that how he passed, but I'm glad the collection was saved and it's here to be referenced by, books with Google and everything now. If it's not on the internet, it's not real. But for anybody that actually wants to do some real research,
Well, we forgot one thing. Everybody knows who we are, but they don't know.
yeah, this is Kyle.
I'm Kyle.
I'm not Kyle.
This is Mike Murphy.
This is Mike Murphy.
This
Hello.
is,
Kyle Kintner.
There you are.
and we got Avery.
And we got Avery Brockmeyer. Meyer.
He got drug into it.
Yeah, our IT guy. And he's
guy.
gonna, whenever he decides he wants to talk, he can talk into this.
Right.
So he might just sit there quietly. But,
Be the smartest thing to do.
yeah.
He'll have to correct us.
If you want a long life without the federal government chasing after you, don't say anything.
Don't say anything.
Yep.
I know nothing.
I see nothing.
There you go. Oh, he's going to fact check us.
Easy
What
for
he's
you
gonna
to say.
Yeah. I've
But
had,
thanks for joining us. It's been a
days.
while. There again, life's been busy, but we're here enjoying the show. And they're featuring Foose gas engines. This is the Foose Fever of 2024. I guess it's a Foose Fever.
now,
right?
I do have to ask, what
Yes.
is the plural? Is that
Feces.
more feces?
Feces.
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 So this is the feces event, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
The plural of foos is feces.
Yeah, because when they don't run their shit. So
Oh, my God. Where's our 7-second loop?
Oh, man. No, we're actually at 3 minutes and 36 seconds, so we're good now.
All right.
We beat the algorithm for YouTube. You can't cuss in the first 3
geez.
minutes.
oh really?
Yep.
Oh well, hell.
Really?
Yeah, so we're golden now. See how easy that was? This isn't hard.
And it wasn't me.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
So we're going to talk about some
This is the ignition special.
the ignition special.
We've been planning this mainly thanks to Kyle over here, the other Kyle.
Yep.
Mainly thanks to him. This was more or less his idea, and he's brought some
Samples.
samples or
Examples.
yeah, whatever you want to call them.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Things.
We're going to give a broad overview in between all of the BSing that we do as to how ignition somewhat works. We don't expect anybody to be any smarter after this, but maybe have a better understanding as to what stuff is.
Right.
So before this started, we was talking about the Wankel rotary engine cycle, and I looked at Kyle over here like he had a third eye in his head, and Murphy politely corrected me. I'm like, yeah, there is a difference in ignition timing on that because of sonic waves and things like that. So that's where this podcast is going to go. Is we're going to go probably way in depth more than we.
But
think
with
we
antique
will.
engines that we deal with today, and most everybody that's fresh into the hobby, we only see 1, 2, 3 different
common
styles.
sources, yes.
3 different styles, and sometimes we just see also hot tube ignition as well. That's a whole nother animal in itself,
Correct.
more than anything.
What would you say as far as the antique gas engine hobby? We have the earliest would be flame ignition, and then from flame ignition, probably went into hot tube, and at the same time, probably was experimenting with spark ignition too.
Correct.
Probably
I
around.
mean, yeah, even like Nicholas Otto's first 4-stroke cycle engine experiment in 1861, he tried to use electric ignition.
Okay.
So he knew that maybe using electrical spark, because of course.
Now, was he just trying to jump a gap between 2 points, or how was he trying to do
I
that?
think, if I recall, it's been a while, because that engine was not successful.
Okay.
And it was melted down. And of course, his first very successful engine was 6 years later.
Okay.
And of course, he had to ban an electro. In those days, electricity was very mysterious to the common man. I mean, scientifically, there was a lot was known about electricity and magnetism, but it wasn't in practice, and it was very impractical. And the biggest problem was insulating materials. Right. Insulating materials were very poor. It was like cloth based, and we've seen all that with we see the reproduction cloth, but it's all made out of modern plastic.
Yeah.
So I think the other thing is that the source of electricity to actually power the ignition. It was difficult to come up with a battery. The lead acid battery was only invented in 1859, so 2 years later it was very rare.
Right.
So I think that was another reason he got away from it. Of course, the whole idea of the engine itself was because illuminating gas or producer gas was available in the cities. So it was like, well, everybody's got a match, and they're used to being handling fire. Electricity is so rare and new that it wouldn't be practical from a marketing standpoint or from a commercial aspect. So he went back, but then as things advanced through telegraphy and telephony in the 1870s, and then distribution of electric power, very quickly things changed. With the onset of the oil industry, with the availability of hydrocarbon liquids that could be not only refined naturally, but also polymerized into different things, all of a sudden you started getting the Bakelites and the hard plastics.
Right.
And they found quickly of the insulating capacity of this. So it's very swiftly moved in. At the same time, you would probably see hot tubes, and that you're starting to see electric ignition.
Yeah.
Especially in applications where there was more of an industrial setting.
It's interesting people seem to forget that at the time that when the internal combustion engine had come about, that was a whole new realm. We went from steam, that was, external combustion or whatever, or however you want to say it, where you were using steam pressure to push a piston back and forth. Me and him learned with Wayne last year that the Otto Langdon atmospheric engine
Actually uses a vacuum.
It really wasn't the power stroke, wasn't the combustion. All it was there for was to throw the piston back up so that the vacuum could pull it back down, and that was your vacuum, or that negative space that the piston was coming back down into.
That was the
your
stroke.
power stroke.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people don't understand that. Yeah, internal combustion started at this time, but everything to do with an internal combustion engine also came about at that time, because the electronic ignition or electric ignition was around the same era, Industrial Revolution, and everybody was just trying anything and everything. And it's just hard to fathom that all of that came about at the same era to culminate to what we have as a gas engine now, or even at that time. And how many times did Edison try to make a bulb? 1,000 something.
Well, he was the 19th century blacksmith approach. He would say that innovation is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. So he just beat his head against the wall till it was bloody.
Yeah.
But he was the 19th century blacksmith idea. So who comes along? Nikola Tesla, Rudolf Diesel, the Wright brothers. They introduced the modern method of engineering. They went and did their gazintas and their ciphering.
Let's put some thought into it.
Exactly. And so they actually
Then beat on it with a hammer.
Yeah. And then when it doesn't work, like,
It worked now.
this should work.
Wham, wham, wham. That does.
Well, what they learned was that the theories of the day were incorrect. Nikola Tesla, the Wright brothers, Rudolf Diesel, they learned that what people thought had happened and what was going on in the physical world was not correct.
Mm-hmm.
And each one of those went back to basics and started over. Otto Lilienthal was a hang glider guy in 1896 who jumped off of coal spoil piles, and he used weight shift. And one day he got hit by a gust and he got swung up and he couldn't shift his weight back. And, St. Pete's pulling his file, here he goes, wham. And the Wright brothers saw that and said, we don't want to do that. We don't want to be out of control. So they put their elevator in the front of the airplane, which is like firing an arrow backwards, because they wanted positive control. But they had taken data from Lilienthal, who had studied airfoils, and Octave Chanute was a famous 19th century railroad bridge engineer who'd made a fortune. He was very much into flying machines. He did some experiments with airfoil data. And so the Wright brothers built their first kites and gliders with their data, and it didn't work the way they thought, so they threw it all out and started over from scratch. And they invented the science of wind tunnels and aerodynamics. Dr. Diesel was like looking at how engines ran, and he determined, using Sadie Carnot's newfangled thermodynamics, that he came up with this ideal cycle that should be the greatest. But reality bites, and Diesel, Diesel got into it because his patent of 1897 described the cycle that the engine ran on. And of course, when they were out there testing them and taking indicator cards, didn't run like that. Yeah. And so in the court of law, the guns were swinging around, and he lost his patent battle in 1907.
Well, that's just it. The patents back in the day were law for if you wanted to have an idea and
they're still
and to run and to run with it. If this is what you say this thing does, it better do that. If it's not, then fair game.
And that's so much different than Edison, because trying 10,000 different compounds to come up with a carbon-covered thread that would live and work, which wasn't practical for very long, because then all of a sudden, the General Electric Corporation was formed when they ran Edison off, and Morgan comes in as a skedaddle dude, and they cut Edison off of General Electric. But it was one of the most first modern companies. And then instead of having, the entrepreneur and some big grand poobah there that didn't know, which end was up, they would, started hiring scientists and using basic physics, that's what really caused it to explode. So the 50, 60 years leading up to the 1890s, just packed the powder and set the shell, and then, boom, boom, it set this whole thing off. And very quickly, you had powerful, lightweight internal combustion engines. You had very consistent fuels, liquid hydrocarbons. Then you had all of a sudden flying machines and automobiles. And at the same time, you were having the innovations of electricity and distribution of electrical power and AC and also radio.
Well, Charles, you have to throw Charles Kettering in there too, with the invention of the Delco light plant. I guess it wasn't. Would it be like commercial electric? It wasn't commercial electric. It was private electric.
But the thing is that the industrial advancement, using all these ideas, made the product so cheap that the farmer could afford a plant.
That's correct.
And the batteries to make an electric life, because everybody wanted electricity because it was so much better than lighting fires and chopping firewood,
Right.
So and that's just the fruits of what was happening in the 1890s, 1910s.
Right.
That all of a sudden they got so good and so consistent fuel that a farmer could afford it.
Right.
And that's another thing that we can relate to today's society, that internal combustion and electricity has always been hand in hand. We've had internal combustion engines that would power generating sets to, a battery bank of power for a farm or whatever it was, to not necessarily run everything via beltline or directly generated power. You'd have like a Delco or whatever at that time, whatever competitors that there was, Delco and Westinghouse. Yeah, Delco and Westinghouse.
Everybody is brother.
Yeah, there was a bunch of them, but Delco's the one that a lot of people know, and they won out, and that was your rural electric was a bank of 32 volt batteries, and you ran your barn, your lights.
Each battery was what, 2 volts?
2 volts or something like that.
1.2 volts.
Yeah, 1.2 volts. You had 30 of them there.
Yeah.
And but I guess where I was rambling with that was, from the beginning of combustion engines, we've always the electric side has been there too, and I think at that time it has kind of come hand in hand too.
It's 2.1.
Is it 2.1?
I
As
think
I
so.
said, I think they're more than 1.2. They're
Well, I've been drinking. Come on.
no.
Getting senile.
I thought for sure they were
2.1.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
it's
can't.
2.1.
You can't. This is a quote from you. You can't drink on showgrounds, so just don't sit anything
No,
on
you
the
got to read
ground.
it correct. You can't have alcohol on the ground.
On the ground, exactly. So you can't set it.
So
on
when
the
Roger
ground.
Bolt picks his beer up upside down, he's violating the policy.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway,
We're getting back to
But seriously, folks.
something.
there's nothing serious about this. But anyway,
But it just shows you that in companies like General Motors, who ended up purchasing the Dayton Electric Laboratories company, they were bringing modern management. It's not just the boffins down there, shocking themselves. You have to take these scientific discoveries and do what like the Wrights and Diesel did and develop these into industry. But the Wrights didn't want to build airplanes. Diesel didn't want to build engines. He wanted to license it. So the idea was to license the idea out into industry that could build this stuff. But then you can see this floods out into the marketplace, and you get a corporation, the first real big modern corporation like General Motors,
yeah,
that gets so big and has so much command of the market that boom,
it's like capitalism is a good thing.
Well,
Absolutely.
and everything's
Absolutely.
kind of coming back around full circle at this point in the game because electric power vehicles were they were designed early 1900s.
They dominated before 1920.
Yeah,
Electric railways.
yeah.
Holy moly!
And people think that
Milwaukee
this
Road.
is
Jeez, I mean, they were everywhere. Electric railways for a guy
Well,
that's in the rail industry. They were
they
were
went by
two
my
times
house.
what steam railroads were.
They had the Dayton Union
least.
City or whatever it was went right by my house. But
Well, all the interurbans were electric.
Yeah, every interurban was electric.
But everybody says that this is new technology. The electric driven car, the hybrid car. That's bullshit. This stuff has been around for 100 years.
But there's a big change.
There's a lot of big changes in it.
One thing is that in the day when automobiles were first developed, they were just a wagon, and
Right.
for a freight truck was just a big farm wagon. Well,
Right.
that doesn't run well in mud.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So the first electric cars, the other thing was nobody could charge the batteries except the Edison. The Edison used 24 volts, so it couldn't go very far. So every 5 or 6 blocks in the city was an Edison steam plant. So then when your electric Brougham started getting low, your chauffeur took it down to the Edison. They slid their battery array out and stuck a charged one in. So people were used to that because they were used to the livery stable. You rode the horse 8 miles and you turn him in for another one.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not
That
used
was
to that
was
today.
good marketing, is what that was. That was good marketing.
But what
And,
happened-
and they're doing that today too. Honda or somebody has the whole battery pack swap out system going on.
That's not new because in the 20s and 30s there was a I can't remember who it was, but
Well, I didn't say it was new.
There was
They're
a,
just doing it again.
well, but there was a taxi company in one
This
of
shit's
the
coming
larger
back around full circle.
Yeah, there was a taxi company in one of the larger cities where you would have your taxi, your battery would become drained, and they would come in and in like 10 minutes they would pull the hood, the bonnet, whatever you want to call it, off of the car, change out the battery pack. They'd have a little gantry crane, pull the battery pack out, put a new one in, the car could leave, and then they would just charge the discharged battery pack. And then the next taxi that would come in, they would swap it out, and that was just how that operated. I'm like,
That'd have been a shitty
Well,
job.
the big difference today is that in those days, I mean, they were very competitive against steam and gas. But what happened around 1920 was when you had the electric self-starter, not a typical electric starter, but the Kettering one.
Yep.
Then you started getting into synchromesh transmissions, and electric just fell behind, but it's never gone away. Forklifts, golf carts, there's been electric power, it's submarines.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the difference today is
locomotives. I mean, they're
they're not battery.
not battery, but they use a power generation to a diesel to a power, a prime mover. Or
Well, it's a DC traction motor.
Yeah,
And
DC,
you've got
DC, AC, whatever you want.
Even in
whatever
the
you want to use.
1930s, you had an automatic control that could anti-skid the thing. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like starting a steam locomotive.
Yeah,
If the anti-skid's working, now you don't have to have the finesse on the throttle. It automatically, it detects the back EMF when it slips, and then it can close relays, and they had that developed early. But the big thing today is Tesla and other electric cars. They're not using lead acid; they're using these lithium-ion disaster, burning batteries. But what makes it practical to have a battery like that is the automatic controls, the
Right.
cheap computing power.
Yeah.
And why is that thing called a Tesla? Because Tesla perfected AC power. The drive motors in a Tesla golf cart, or whatever the hell that damn thing is, they're 3-phase motors and they have variable
Cybertruck?
frequency drives.
The Cybertruck you're talking
Jesus, that looks like something Darth Vader would like take his driving test in.
Your father.
about? Oh man.
But okay,
where are we now?
I don't know how we go from ignition to Cybertrucks.
I don't know.
Well, but no, we were talking about electricity because,
Yeah.
of course, with
Well, that's
ignition,
ignition.
what are you trying to do?
Right.
Okay, it's a
Create
gas
electric.
engine where you're trying to create heat to cause the air to heat up, to cause a pressure differential across the piston. But how do you do that? You got to light a fire. But how do you light a fire? So we have match that you have a lot of friction that creates a lot of heat, ionizes a gas. But the other way to do it is what we're going to discuss is where you can draw an electric arc, where you can ionize the gas, and it goes to like 5,000-6,000 degrees. That's why it's blue. So in the presence of an explosive mixture of a hydrocarbon or something and oxygen, with that kind of a violent shakeup, it's it causes the it's like the ecstasy at the dance club. So the hydrocarbon and the oxygen sit
candy.
there they are out there behind the dumpster. Sticks or streets. WD-40. Ding, ding, ding. So it causes this reaction to start where then the oxygen gloms onto the hydrocarbon, breaks it up, releases the energy, causes the heat to go, and then you push the piston. Because, of course,
Yeah,
we
really
talked
push the
about-
piston.
I was cool, buddy. I was cool, man. So you find that you go back to, you look at the Otto and Langen, we slipped away from that a little bit.
Yeah.
That's an atmospheric engine where the combustion creates a vacuum. Not too hot.
Very good.
Okay.
Turning up, actually.
Oh, up? Oh,
Yeah.
God. Okay, sorry. I'm used to seeing view meters. So like
I'm
flying
sorry,
by.
we don't have a TV in here, so you can watch you peak and.
No, I just meters. I'm just used to the old shit. Charlie Horse.
Speaking of
excuse
old
me.
shit.
You know, old shit.
Do you need a banana?
Get the
No.
grease gun out.
I
He
need
needs
a
dessert.
straw. For the internal tap.
He got excited about talking about being behind the dumpsters.
Well, I'd be in there getting the junk out of the dumpster. Oh, what are you guys doing? I'm getting an old television set.
Is that CRT TV?
So, if you go way, way back, the very first practical steam engine was the Newcomen engine for 1712, and it was the same thing, where it was a big pumping engine where there was a rocking beam, and then the plunger would go down into the
And
mine.
there's one of those up at the Henry Ford, I do believe.
The oldest one in existence at Henry Ford. So then,
Okay.
when the piston is up, the steam would be put into the cylinder as it's climbing up, and then the steam would be shut off at like 3 psi, so the boiler wouldn't date, and then they'd squirt cold water in there and cause an instant condensation.
And then that'll create a vacuum.
A gas, fills a big volume, but when it condenses with liquid,
Yep.
it's very low volume. Now you got this giant vacuum, so atmospheric pressure then pushes the piston down, which lifts the plunger up. So that was dominating. For
It's not vacuum.
What's that?
It's not vacuum.
Well, it's essentially a vacuum, but it's not. It's not like the vacuum. If you go up 100 miles an hour, 100 miles above the Earth on the space station, roll down the window, flick your cigarette out. That's a vacuum.
Yeah.
So anyway, so for 60 years that dominated pumping wells until Charlie Horse other side, right, full rudder, all head flank. Jesus. So you find that James Watt, who really revolutionized engines, he came up with the crank and. Hey, cut that out, butthead. So he's the guy that perfected the crank mechanism.
Right.
He gave us the stuffing box and double acting cylinder. But one of his first improvements was he said, wait a minute, you've got the hot steam going in the cylinder, you shoot cold water in there, you're wasting all this heat.
Right.
So he had the steam jacketed cylinder and he had an external condenser. So his first great contribution wasn't his pressure pushing the piston and double acting, and he took the windmill governor, the flyball governor that the Dutch were using in the 1500s to control windmills, and he applied that to an engine to control the throttle. There's all these great innovations that go all the way back to James Watt. But then, in the 19th century, they were easily adopted to the engine. So it's interesting to me that even after the high-pressure steam engine was out and high-speed steam engine, there was a lot of pressure. By the pressure of the steam pushing the piston, now, you go back to the atmospheric. It was like, what were they drinking or something?
Right. Well, at A.D. Baker, Swanton, Ohio, they had the uniflow and the counterflow. That was, I don't know how they work, but
Well, the uniflow, the problem is on a steam cylinder when you go back with the steam admission. Okay, the steam expands and cools down,
Right.
and then you open the exhaust port and you push that cold steam, which then steals heat out of the iron, and the next load of steam coming in from the boiler immediately loses heat to that.
Right.
On a uniflow, when the piston is moving back, the valves are open, injecting steam.
It's allowing hot steam to come
Okay.
in and keep your temperature differences equal.
Okay.
But you go to an open port.
so a counterflow or a
Uniflow where the steam goes through, and once the piston's pushed back, it goes out the ports.
Right.
So that the steam only goes one way and the head end stays hot. and then you eliminate the slide valve for the exhaust.
Right.
The counterflow is where the steam goes in, it has to go out the same side,
Right.
which then runs into this.
And Baker, they had a lot of those valve systems on locomotives and other things as well.
Well, AD Baker, it's a 40-body link that's the Baker valve gear, which is AD Baker, but it was very popular in locomotives.
Oh, yeah.
It was tough. The Walshirts from Belgium gave it a run for its money. It was a lot of Walshirts gear.
Right.
But it got rid of the Stephenson gear because the Stephenson gear had eccentrics on the axles,
That's
which,
correct.
as you know, getting in the pit under a locomotive, that's not a good place to have stuff that needs a lot of attention.
Right.
And is liable to anything in the gauge that gets kicked up. So the Stephenson link was a big problem. There was a lot of people in the 19th century working around that. So the Walshert gear was I mean, even to the end, people built Walshert gear, but the Baker 4-body link was really something else.
Yep.
And it put Swanton, Ohio on the map.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it works the same way as like the Gaudis and like the Bacchuses and those. It's the same concept.
Well, it's like a Detroit diesel.
Yeah, it blows it out before the heat can stay.
Yeah, it so you expand out, the whole cylinder cools down, but then it leaves.
Yep.
The problem with uniflows is compression. I mean, there was a lot of people with steam cars and steam engines. So when the piston comes forward again, it covers the ports and the valves are closed, it compresses exhaust up in here.
Right.
And then you can really get a high pressure, which then fights the efficiency of the engine.
Right.
So there's snifter exhaust valves in it and auxiliary valves to dump that before the admission valves open to let steam into the cylinder again.
Right.
So Doble and some of these other steam car guys were working on that. Did you mute me?
No, I muted me so I could get refilled.
Oh, he's got to open the beer, folks.
So we
Okay, well,
Hey, you talked about 17 tangents. I'm like,
I know.
sure, that's enough.
no. We're
This
only,
is ignition and
we're
some
only
stuff.
we're only 26 minutes in, and there's been like 3 minutes of ignition. Talk.
yeah.
But we haven't even talked about injecting
have
TE
to.
and TEB to get a rocket engine lit.
But we have to.
Wait a minute, that's out of scope.
But in reality, I mean, all joking aside, in reality, we have to talk about where the internal combustion engine came from
Yes.
before you can even have ignition. So you had an internal combustion engine that was derived from people that built steam engines. So they're
What's the
I
first?
should say built steam engines, had knowledge
What's
of
the first
that
internal
principle.
combustion engine?
I know.
it was
But
the Otto.
What is it? Tell
Otto
me.
Langen. Is it not? Well, who was it?
What was the first time we used expanding gas to push something?
I don't know. Last time I farted.
Mother. Yeah. Oh, but think about it. What was the first time we changed phase of a compound or some sort of substance, changed its phase from a liquid or solid to a gas to push something?
Hydrogen?
He's gonna make us look real dumb.
I know, we're done anyway.
Nobody knows. This is goofball shit here. No, I mean, about 1380, it ended up in Europe. It changed the world. Why did the knights in Shining Harbor had to go get a job at Wendy's or drive for Uber? What happened to those castles?
Cannon.
Gunpowder.
So that's really the first heat engine. The first time we changed this compound into
yeah.
a gas.
No shit.
Them Chinese.
Them
Every
damn
time.
Chinese.
Every time.
That's where it comes from because it took a long time because the Chinese had all this gunpowder and fireworks and they just watched it go. But when it got into the hands of these greedy Europeans,
No.
you could take this pipe and shove a rock in it and kill your neighbor and take his old lady.
That's a whole nother podcast. The Europeans.
But my point is that this is where, if you look at the first internal combustion engines in the 1700s, they were talking about the gunpowder engines, where they knew they could push a projectile with this gas that was developed from the combustion of the powder. You could push this projectile. So it's like, well, why can't we repeat this? And then
They couldn't.
catch it?
They were trying to figure out how to harness that power
Exactly.
from the gunpowder repetitively.
And it was in parallel with steam when steam was very practical and worked because Newcomen, actually it's Savory's fire engine, which he never built, but he got the patent. So Newcomen got screwed and died a pauper because Savory sued him and all that money went to Savory. But in parallel to this, they said, well, wait a minute. We got this boiler. We got all this coal. We got this heat. It's not very practical. So there's a whole school of thought trying to make the gunpowder engine work. But then they realized, well, that's maybe isn't the practical thing. But when all of a sudden producer gas from the coke ovens were available.
Yeah.
You know, and they were heating the limelight, you know, at the theater where they would create that limestone limelight and shine on the actors with the gas. And that gas is what really got like Otto going. And, you know, there's like Lenoir in France. And, well, you always hear this rumor that Otto had gone to Italy and seen this guy that had a 4-stroke cycle engine running and got the idea from him and kind of stole it because the guy wasn't patenting it and wasn't entrepreneurial, wasn't going out. So, in my opinion, between you and the fence post over there was this parallel path. But what happened was the steam engine became very, very practical and dominated the market. What are you going to do? Reinvent the wheel? So you start using like the big snow engine, the Nuremberg style engine, like the snow up there, double acting tandem. Double acting, where does that come from?
I wonder where that comes from.
Where that came from? So it's like, let's just take this slide valve out and put the igniters in there and pray.
Yeah.
You know, like GM with the 5.7 diesel, pull the spark plugs out, stick the injectors in, you know, stick an injection pump on there and like, yeah, you gonna buy that? It was cool, got ya.
The answer is yes.
So I think there's a parallel development. But what really killed the internal combustion engine was the fact that you had this flame ignition. Because if you've got a fire, you already have a fire, so you've got this ionization occur. You've already got this oxidizing reaction. And then you have to open this little window. Well, you know, that's not going to work very well when you're going down the rails at 40 miles an hour, is it?
Yeah.
You know, so or it's raining. So what really made the internal combustion take off was electric ignition, which is what we're going to discuss here.
Maybe.
Someday.
We might get
So
3
in the
all
morning.
night. We got all night.
we got on. I got to be on the gate down there at Jake's at like 6:30. So
AM.
yeah, so there'll be a stuff. But the point is that to this conversation, to get way back around, you know, is that it wasn't until electric ignition came along that we really get into the age of the internal combustion engine. Not like what's behind you on the GP, you know, that's a different story. That's compression ignition where you heat the air so much that when you introduce the hydrocarbon, it's already pissed off and it's just like,
Yeah.
you know, it breaks
It's already
down.
under pressure. It's vaporized to a
Well, but
point.
it's 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it's vaporized to a point that it's so fine that it's
So fine.
that it's in it's
Well,
an ideal mixture. Like the heat can get to every
Liquid
little,
hydrocarbons don't burn. I've put fires out with diesel fuel
Oh, I have too.
because you work
I've-
for the railroad.
I've
Of course you
welded
have.
I've welded diesel fuel tanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, as they're full of diesel fuel.
But the problem is you have to make it into a vapor.
yeah,
So what makes gasoline dangerous is it boils at room temperature. So that's why you always smell it, no smoking. But diesel fuel boils at like 150, 160. So it's much safer because when there's a vapor and there's oxygen available, it doesn't take much of a spark because you consider what's going inside an engine cylinder. There is a lot of swirl going on and things are moving fast. And then this very feeble little spark instigates the whole riot and off she goes.
So we went from steam to flame ignition. And I think we should touch a little bit on flame ignition because that in itself is very unique.
Genius, too, to come up with that, right?
And for it to work.
Yeah.
It to me, it blows my mind that you can have a flame and then have basically, to me, what reminds me of like a slide valve on a steam engine that opens and closes to suck a flame into a cylinder.
Doesn't suck it in.
Well, okay.
It just traps a little bit of it, and you got this gas air mixture that's going to burn. It's going to take a certain amount of time to burn.
Yeah.
And then it seals off from the outside world. And hopefully before the fire goes out, it flash hole opens up to the cylinder and sets it off. That's why when you're starting these things, you can't dilly-dally. You can see guys like the holy shit down at Rough and Tumble, this big twin slide valve. You got to kind of smartly crank that thing because if you go too slow, the little fire goes out before the flash hole opens.
Well, you know, my slide valves at home that I have, I'm so familiar.
Well, I mean, there's a ton of them here, but then you got to put up with those guys down there to deal with it, you know.
Yeah. Anyway,
So yeah, that's the genius of Otto.
so that was where it kind of started, where they had a flame ignition that sounds like it's temperamental to a point.
Oh yeah, it you know, if you run them, I don't know how much you've run them, but I run them a lot, and you know they can be a pain in the ass.
Yeah,
you know,
so
and they're not reliable, so it's not.
You have something that will work. Like we
great
have
for stationary.
Yes,
Yeah.
we have an engine. We have something that will provide power, but it's right here. We have to belt it to something, so everybody's mind starts spinning. I'm like, well, what other applications could we use this in? So they start looking for a workaround from the flame ignition, and then, as we said, electricity is around this time. Hey, that gets hot. let's try to do a electric ignition. Mm-hmm. So I kind of guess that's kind of what my question is. What was the first, were they just jumping a spark gap with an electric ignition, or had they figured out points at that time?
Well, basically the trip igniter, we're going to talk about here, that the points that are inside the cylinder, because of course, like,
because that blows people's mind. Because I talked to like a Webster ignition. That's an easy one to do. I'll take
not to time it.
but you can take a Webster mag with a mag bracket and take it to a gas engine show and show somebody, but just by tripping it, like, hey, this is what's going on inside the cylinder. It's super easy, and Webster mags emit a beautiful blue spark, especially in the at least mine do, in the daylight. So it blows people's minds. Like, there's no spark plug? No, like this thing open and closing that shoots off sparks is what is firing this. This is an old type of ignition. So
you have to do that because basically when this first started, we were talking before we started rolling here, that the insulating capacity of insulators was very poor, and it was starting to become better, but it took some time before commercially effective insulation was good enough to take very high voltages. So some of the first ignitions...
you probably didn't have porcelain and everything.
Oh, yeah, porcelain.
Well, they couldn't refine it to a spark plug at that point.
Well,
porcelain's been around for a long time.
This is just my opinion, but the thing is that
it maybe not been used in that application.
People knew that because of breaking electric circuit, you see a spark.
Right.
And it was noticed around 1831 by Michael Faraday that if you put a coil of wire in there, you get a much bigger spark.
Right.
Okay, so basically, you take 1831 Faraday's experiments with electricity, and that just 40 years later, people know that when you break that circuit, you get a little spark, and if you put this coil in there, you get a big spark. Now, we're talking very, very low voltages, but it's all done by the current.
Right.
So when the points close, the current flows, a big magnetic field.
And that's why we have low tension coils, like on just a battery and coil engine. The bigger the coil, it seems to be the better spark you got.
Yeah, but see, it's the voltage is very, very low.
Right.
But so as soon as those points open in the cylinder, if you didn't have the coil there, and you can do this, you can demonstrate this, you get a very feeble little spark. But you can think of the coil as like a flywheel.
Right.
So while the points are closed, this magnetic field builds. It's like speeding up a flywheel. And then, when the points open, as they go open, the electric current doesn't want to stop flowing, and it starts to ionize the air. But once the air breaks down into electrons and protons, or nuclei and electrons, it's a really good conductor. It has very little resistance. So as the points open up, it draws a bigger streak of lightning, which exposes more and more and more of the gas-air mixture.
Right.
But what's happening is all the energy stored in that magnetic field, as it collapses, because once the current stops, it's got to collapse. But its field lines collapse past the wires of the coil and regenerate more electricity. So it lengthens out that spark. But if you put a voltmeter on it, the voltage is very, very low. Right. You don't need good insulation.
That's correct.
And so for about 10 years, that kind of dominated. But then with Bosch coming up with a high tension or high voltage magneto, instead of having the magneto like here that generates a very low voltage and a lot of current to do this spark inside the cylinder, you can think about that. You have a fire here, and you've got a pivot, and you've got exhaust gases, and it makes the points in the brake ignition very much a maintenance nightmare. So that in Germany, they were starting to come up with the idea of let's have a generator like that, but it makes very, very, very high voltage because to jump the gap.
So it can overcome.
It can overcome the resistance of that gap because as you squeeze the mixture and the air density inside that cylinder goes up, its dielectric capacity goes up, which means it takes more and more voltage to jump. And then so finally, when the voltage is so high, the air breaks down like lightning. Lightning jumps from a mile up. So this is miniature lightning, but it takes 9 to 10,000 volts to do it. In the 1880s, there was very few things that were practical that could eat that.
Right.
That you could sell to somebody and they could run it, know.
Right.
But
And
by
they
the
feel comfortable
1890s,
with it.
everything was changing.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you got, Greg Johnson owns a 6-cylinder car from 1909. It's got make and break igniters in every cylinder.
Oh, my.
Boy, you better have a AAA card with you. Have the record follow you.
AAA is terrible. I have that. Takes some hours to get to you.
Last time
How many times does that thing run on all 6 cylinders?
Go ask Greg. I've never seen it go. But what made things like flying machines, motorcycles, and cars practical was the fact that they'd come up with this generator that at the right time it would generate an immense amount of voltage that would break down the insulation of that air gap and cause it to jump. Like driving Jake's buggy. I was going to go up to get gas, and I was going to get the crap cleaned out of it from putting around the field. So I got rolling up the hill towards the snow, and I got it in high gear, and I started pushing down, and all of a sudden she would bump, 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 because the pressure in the cylinder got so high that all the worn out crap in that thing, it couldn't make enough voltage to jump there. It was jumping somewhere else to the crappy spark plug wires, and the engine started to misfire. So how do you save that? Like, get your foot out of it.
Yep, get out
You
of
get the cylinder pressure down. Now the spark can jump again.
Right.
Yeah, that thing probably hadn't been flat-footed in years.
He was pretty hard on it, but not for long. I would just, went long up the hill. So
Okay, so you had a decent load on it.
yeah.
When
And
I-
why had he? Were you on it when it did that? No, I don't think you were on there.
But dealing in the hobby that we deal with today.
Stay awake now, Kyle.
I'm here. I'm here.
Yeah,
Hey,
you're up next,
yeah.
buddy. Come on.
This was your idea. You got to add to
I
it.
knew this is just Murphy takes care of the engineering end of it.
Well, we're getting off this BS end of it, and we're going to get into the practical.
Dealing
Here,
with the
we
hobby
got
that
to try to
we
feel, understand what it is.
Yeah. That's kind of the direction I went.
no, I'm good.
Take it to like where ignition started and how the internal
And that's
combustion
kind of where we
engine
come up to
started.
here. And then dealing with the hobby that we're all dealing with today, we basically deal with 3 different types of electronic or electric ignition.
Yep.
And we deal with a hot tube ignition, which is whatever. And then we have a compression ignition, which is a diesel or Vid or
Veed.
Veed.
Yeah.
Veed. There's the H is silent, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Okay.
I ain't saying nothing. I went to high school in Kentucky.
Veed. Yeah, we
Veed.
we are the 2 biggest proponents of Veed here that are teaching electrical ignition. I think Rasmus Veed's going to shit can us after this.
Y'all
one.
mean they're not Hivids?
They're not Hivids.
Them
I always
things
said
aren't
Hivids.
They're not
Yeah,
HIV.
they-
Yeah,
Yeah.
you used to call it a Hivid.
Yeah.
I'd
Do
say,
you?
and I'd say Gesundheit.
Okay.
No, you called them that before, right?
Yeah, I always call them Hivids. That's always I always thought you pronounced.
I mean,
the
that's
H.
kind of how it looks.
It does, but,
But
it's
dealing in the hobby that we are in today, and for people listening and everything that have engines or don't have engines, we deal with a Webster low tension and or igniter,
Yep.
which is also low tension or low tension,
And
low
that's the one-
voltage.
that's the one, high current, low voltage.
That's correct. And then we have a Wyco EK, which you see thousands of, which is a high voltage or high tension.
You'll see that with a spark plug and not with
That-
breaker points.
That's
in
correct.
an igniter. Yeah.
And then we'll have the buzz coil, which was the Ford invent the buzz coil. Okay, I don't know who did.
Buzz.
Yeah, there's a guy called Rumcorp,
Okay,
and that might come from the world of electricity
okay,
because they started understanding the making really, really high tension in
Right.
like the 1860s and 70s for laboratory use, where they had,
Okay.
the windings were in oil, and they were looking at this, but they could get these discharges, but they wanted a lot of them, so they come up with that buzzer circuit.
So basically, they stole that from the laboratory side.
So this
of
is
the
back
world.
in the day where they were taking stuff and they just wanted to shock the crap out of something to see what it would do. So
Well, there
they-
was some of this because it used to be like a parlor game. You take this crap up to the Royals, and everybody would hold hands, and and they were doing this like in the 1780s, but with pithballs.
everybody make a chain and
Yeah.
hold a hand, and then we're going to make a spark
And-
jump
and-
from
but
somebody's
this
finger.
but a lot of times playful things like that lead to this
Yeah.
big mushroom cloud over Nagasaki. Now we're not going there yet.
Konnichiwa.
No, because that's not electronic. Because the difference between electronic and electrical deals with just the electrons. So all the combustion we do is just using electrons, but there's very little energy in them.
Right.
You wouldn't think that when your friggin' foot's on fire if you spill gasoline and you get it, But it's very, very low power.
Right.
But if you look at nuclear power, is where you actually use in the nucleus, where the binding forces are so high. If you break that, you better be the B-29 going 400 miles an hour that way.
Right.
And praying
Because
your
you just
prayers.
unleashed the sun behind you over Hiroshima
That's
or Nagasaki.
correct. So it's two different worlds, and that's why there's an immense difference in the
I don't know if
energy.
we have any
release.
Japanese listeners.
It doesn't matter.
Well, not at this point in life.
I don't think they care.
You think they're over it now?
No,
No.
they're still pissed because they lost.
Have you ever heard of revisionist history?
Actually,
No.
the only thing that stopped that war, about an hour after they dropped that, the Japs knew exactly what it was because in the 30s when everybody was looking at nuclear stuff, it was all wide open. But all the people in power, the politicians and that, they said, "Oh, that's Buck Rogers pie in the sky. That never happened." 1939, boom, it all went under the table. So all this nuclear research was all in the scientific journals, and every country in the world had it. So when that thing went off, they knew it was U-235. But they also knew that U-235 is so difficult to separate that they know we only had one.
Ah.
and they didn't care.
Yeah, we were bluffing when we. How many did we say we was going to drop?
No, he didn't say how many. But we dropped that one, and they knew, they don't have any more of those because they knew it would take years to get that much U-235. Little did they know that we had developed reactors, and we're creating plutonium-239, which doesn't exist anymore in nature because it only has a half-life of 24,000 years. So all that was created in the nova that created the material that our solar system is made from is already decayed. So all the plutonium-239 is man-made. So 3 days later, when that thing popped, an hour later, like, oh, shit, they built that big reactor, y'all. And, and so then, but what really stopped the war was there was a coup attempt against the emperor, and the palace guards stopped it. And the emperor said, Sa konnichiwa, we done. They said, I wouldn't say, the emperor stopped the war.
Yeah, Japan's emperor, who had never, ever been heard over...
Why'd they believe him if they'd never heard him?
I know, that blows my mind.
Maybe they drink a lot.
Well, sake.
Sucky.
But you're right, that blows my mind. But Japan's emperor at that time came over the radio and said, hey, no bueno, no more. We're done.
Right.
Because the palace guards defeated the admirals and generals who wanted to continue the war.
Yeah.
Little did they know.
And the generals wanted to continue. They're like, no, this isn't real, because all the generals that were in the islands,
they didn't care.
They're like, this didn't happen. They didn't see it. They wanted to continue the war.
The nuclear blast did nothing. What they didn't realize is now there was like 17,000 B-17s, 8,000 Lancasters, and 20,000 B-24s with nothing to do in Europe. And they were moving them across the Atlantic, through the United States and Canada, and they were sending them to the Pacific. We had Okinawa, 350 miles from Tokyo. Anything that would start could get there. And they were going to burn Japan to a cinder. There wouldn't be a stick standing up. And you think the nuclear bombs were bad? And the only thing that stopped it was they couldn't get Dow to make napalm fast enough. And they'd hold off on it. And the nuclear thing stopped it by the end of 1945, Japan would just be this glowing cinder.
Yeah.
I'll be damned.
So the nuclear bomb saved millions and millions and millions of lives. And there's a lot of Japanese that realize that.
So then we waited.
Okay, now wait a minute. Now
we waited. We waited a couple years.
We weren't going to that down to nuclear. There was that 5 minutes of your life.
No,
Sorry.
It's all right. That's
but
fine.
that's nuclear,
No,
and that's not the same as electrical.
I never dug down the rabbit hole of World War II or anything like that. So I don't.
But you think
I
of the
don't know.
miracle of what these guys were doing in the 1700s, 1800s, and then all of a sudden we get this industrial stuff. And within just a few decades, you had a machine like the Trinity shot and then the plutonium. It is just absolutely stunning what was done in that period of time from like 1800 to 1940. Unbelievable. And this is right where we are with this hobby.
Exactly.
We're seeing this explosion of technique. And this is what we have here is this interim step.
If you look at history in a whole,
He said whole. It was cool.
like you said, from 1800 and before, we're cavemen. I mean, we're Dark Ages
Not really.
to a degree.
Kepler wasn't.
Okay.
Oh, now we're not going there.
No,
Don't
but,
worry,
but
Kyle.
if you want to,
We ain't going that hole.
if you wanted to time travel and go back and have some
No,
relative,
they don't want to go back.
no, I wouldn't either. But if you wanted to time travel and have some relative degree of modern world, you gotta go. You have to draw a line somewhere, where like how far back you would go, and like I don't know, like Civil War and before, I would draw the line there, because I think from there on, then you can
Which
have
Civil War? The last one or the one's coming up?
the last one. Not the one that I posted.
I mean, do we
about.
have to meet at Dunkin' at like 6:30 tomorrow? or something?
What the one I posted about on
Dunkin'
Facebook?
Donuts?
Yeah, Prospect Place on like July 26th or whatever it was. They were announcing the Civil War. I don't know if it was the last one or the new one. I don't know, but
Maybe it's a reenactment of the Battle of Chancellorsville or
I
something.
hope so.
But anyway,
But
No,
no,
to your
if you were
point,
to go
because-
back, if you were to go back in time, that
You are correct.
you would want to draw a line somewhere if you wanted to have some resemblance of modern society, and from, to me, would be the 1860s and before, or 1860s and after, to have some resemblance of
You
modern
had the electric
society.
telegraph.
Yes.
You had
you had telegraph lines.
wrought iron. You had,
had-
well, they were doing 70 down the Hudson in the trains.
Yeah, you could get point A to point B
Reasonable
and
amount
not
of time.
have to be on horse and buggy. You had
You could get killed by a snakehead in the car, but, well,
Yeah.
we'll take that risk.
Yeah. You know, you had modern stuff that we call modern amenities.
And there they are at Chancellorsville cutting that arm off that axle.
Back then, now, yeah, you're right, because if you...
But there's different levels because medicine was nowhere near. What you're talking about is you got to look at like a bar graph where, you know, medicine...
It depends on what you're looking
exactly,
for. You're right.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're looking for. Are you looking like industrial stuff or you want medicine? Because if you want medicine, I'll just stick where I'm at.
Because there's old thing where there was these Prussian officers and they were visiting this Union artillery battery.
Yeah.
And they're all stuffed up, and there was like, this Union battery is going nuts shooting. And this Prussian officer goes to the artillery officer, so he says, "That was a brilliant demonstration." And like a Union officer, "What the hell are you talking about? Demonstration. We're in combat." And the guy's like, "What?" Because you couldn't see the target. And just a few years before that, gunners only shot at the target. Well, there's this guy over there in this tent with these weird glass jars and this wire thing, and he's going clickety click 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 click. A little more to the left.
Yeah, they're relaying where the target is.
Calling full of shot.
Yeah.
That was the first time that had done. And to your point, this was a convergence of the telegraph, and sometimes they were using balloons with signal flags to spot or so. The Civil War was a big. That's I think why you choose that as a turning point, because we see now in history that a lot of this has converged
using the technology of the time to be able to, you know, in my opinion, this may be a bad opinion, but in my opinion, war pushes.
Don't do that. That's contagious.
Yeah, stop that. War pushes our advances a lot further.
Everything.
Yes.
There's nothing that has been advanced besides war.
I'm not saying war's a good thing. By no means.
We just do it.
Yeah, you're right. It just happens. But it advances technology so quick, so fast that it's unfathomable.
And that's correct, because what do you think caused this big boom between 1860 and 1945?
Exactly.
Two world wars.
Exactly.
The Civil War, the War of 1870. This is where the Germans learned that trick. They were using a new Krupp steel, and all of a sudden the French cavalry were like, "Where is these shells coming from?" They didn't see it coming.
Yeah, it's unreal.
But then right on the heels of that, that's where you have Nicholas Otto perfecting his machine that's going to make money. You know, with he gives up on the electric because it's just a little too early for practicality. In the labs, yeah, they had it, but you're not going to see it at the general store. You're not going to see it down the street at the baker's
It
shop.
didn't make it to a commercial level yet.
It wasn't ready for that level. It was around, but so we went back to this ingenious thing, this flame ignition.
Yeah.
You know, with that timed port, and you got a little bit of mixture of gas and air, and it has to burn long enough. But, you know, you run them, it's amazing. And it's a miracle. No steam, no boiler.
And they run fine. They run just as well as any other engine.
So you get a breeze.
True. They got to be in a no...
But that's where they went.
You can't turn a fan on.
Because what they were for is they were getting underneath the giant of steam, where even in those days, you needed an insurance licensed engineer, big physical plant. Well, the Tinker, the Taylor, the Cooper, they couldn't afford that because they couldn't. It didn't make any sense to have a small steam plant. So this was his market that he was going after, purely to make money. Yeah. Just like the Wright brothers weren't building a flying machine to just goof off because they were rich. No, they were making a flying machine to get rich, which you said before, capitalism. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so necessity being
they sold They had a bicycle shop before that. I mean, they weren't.
Well, they saved up $1,000.
They weren't 1897,
and then they kind of they were $1,000.
Well, in that time, yes.
So they stopped working and they started working.
They weren't Rockefeller wealthy.
No,
by no means.
No. But they had that entrepreneurial spirit,
yes,
and they were open to new ideas, just like Otto was open to new ideas. But then there were a lot of people who were too, because all of a sudden this convergence of better insulating material, better understanding of electricity. Guys like Tesla, guys like Steinmetz at GE, you know, they were wakening up electrical engineering, which then was improving the power distribution generation, which that trickled down into this.
Exactly.
That trickled down to what we have here on the table.
Well, and that's like everything else that you look back at in history. It starts out like computers. The first computers were rooms. They were massive, and now they're in our cell phones, and that's in a span of 70 years, 80 years. I'm like that's a short time frame to go from something that is the size of a massive room.
Hey, look! I just found a book on train derailments.
Look out!
He's in management now. Look, derailment.
It was employee cost.
MOW. It's always MOW's fault.
It was track cost. T111 track cost.
Well, those guys always leave the switch in the wrong position.
They do.
That'll dump them. That's at Georgia. Oh my god,
man. All right.
Well, I think
so.
Boy, now
I think
we're digressing
also
in derailments.
a lot of this is spurred on by labor savings, and that's what I think drives a lot of this technology is the fact that, like you're saying, we had steam, so we had a boiler, we had all this BS that we had to go through, and it's
So you had a guy.
And you had like 4 or 5 employees
yeah.
that had to maintain that.
Yeah, when you think of all this stuff that we look at, it's all being driven by let's cut people out, let's minimize, let's increase
It's just
profit.
like the kiosk at McDonald's anymore.
How
You
can
hate
we
to say it.
automate this?
How can we automate this? And you hate to say it, but it's like this is what really drives a lot of this stuff on. And to your point too of the world wars, it's very politically correct, but incorrect, I should say. But there's this guy in Germany that spurred on a lot of things that that guy. But I mean,
That's not a locomotive starting either.
Think how we advanced just in that. What would you say, 1935 to 1945? Think about how much advancement we had there,
least.
And I always, and once again, I don't think you might correct me on this, Murphy, but I don't think when you go into NASA's visitor center, they say, hey, we had a guy from Germany that really helped us get to the moon.
That's an interesting thing because down in Huntsville, he was such a hero, von Braun.
Yeah.
There's a von Braun Center, and
He's an American icon.
Yeah.
But the whole other side recruiting him.
Yeah.
Recruiting.
Yes.
To the victors belong the spoils.
Exactly. Well, the victors write the history too. So.
Yep. Well, and they could kind of cover up for his what would be considered today, in today's light, as transgressions. So he knew about Nordhausen. He'd been to Nordhausen where they were constructing the V2s. There were 3,000 prisoners at Peenemünde that did the work alongside of them.
Yeah.
The sign there is like, we're going to methylate the alcohol. Don't drink the rocket fuel was in like 6 languages. There's no way von Braun didn't know about that. But what is he going to do? Complain?
Yeah.
They
To
always-
who?
Yeah.
Well, there's always room for one more on that box score going to Auschwitz.
To the ovens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sauteed or simmered. The flavor can't be beat.
Old Zyklon B.
Hey, it's good insect killer.
American made product.
But yeah,
Probably at Mound Laboratories in Miamisburg or some shit.
Well, no, they were building what was called the Urchin, the plutonium-210 initiator that went inside the sphere of the plutonium bomb.
Well, and I didn't know this either. Like when they say you can't live a day without Dayton, my God, they're almost right. In Oakwood, there was a little bit.
Well, especially if you're on welfare, you get down that way.
Yeah, I know. like in Oakwood during the Second World War, there was laboratories in there making all kinds of shit.
Runnymede Playhouse. So back before all this BS with socialism had, people like rich industrialists were very much into this. So there was a thing called the Runnymede Playhouse. It was behind a big mansion.
Okay.
And it was where they used to have plays.
Right.
And so they needed to get going on this project. And you heard of Monsanto. Monsanto was a Dayton company that got the job to make what was called the Urchin. So inside this sphere of plutonium was this little sphere that had plutonium-210 in it. And when the explosive lenses went off to crush this sphere into criticality, to cause it to go into a chain reaction, it would crush that polonium-210 sphere, which would have a flood of neutrons, which would really kick off the reaction.
Right.
Because what they dropped over Hiroshima, was I too hot again?
No, I had to burp.
Oh, okay. Where's my mute? Damn
That was
it?
being polite.
That was mighty white of you. So anyway, the U-235 weapon, only about 20% of the fissile material actually went off. The bomb disassembled itself before it all could get in the party. Because that slug was only coming at 6,000 feet per second. That's imperceptibly slow.
Right.
Well, on the implosion device, it's like 70% of the fissile material went off, so it was twice as powerful as the previous bomb. But one thing that helped do that was that big flood of neutrons coming from the thing that they were building in Oakwood. They literally had to tear down the Runnymede Playhouse and haul it away because they were so lackadaisical because they didn't understand the dangers that they was all polluted. But if you go to the Mound Museum, they have pieces of the glass from the windows of the Runnymede Playhouse. You turn the lights off,
Yeah, it's closed.
Right.
and then your nuts itch.
Yeah. Well, the Mound Museum's in our backyard.
You've been up there? I'm a member of it.
I've never been there, but
You better get up there. They're going to shut it down.
oh boy.
And they're going to be like the NCR down at the Caroline Park. There's be paintings in that.
Oh,
It's kind of neat to see it.
I need to go down and see that then.
When do you want to go?
I don't care.
All right, let's go.
And that's
That's
another
pretty
pocket.
cool.
We need to go down to Caroline Park and talk to
Well,
those people
that's
too
the thing.
sometime.
Yeah, you need to go to Caroline Park, the Air Force Museum, the Packard Museum, and Mound Labs.
So I've been to the Packard Museum. I
Okay.
love it.
Isn't that awesome?
Downtown, it's awesome. Yeah.
I've been to the Packard
We're
Museum.
really digressing now, boys and girls. Sorry, I didn't speak into the mic.
Well, no, I've been to a lot of
yeah, but they all use electric ignition.
Yeah, how about that?
Well,
No,
even the jet engine.
I like what the Packard Museum does, and then I've been up to Auburn, Indiana, to Duesenberg's, and they got
DAC.
And
I'll take you down to Caroline
Holy
Park
moly.
sometime. It's really mind blowing.
the Duesenberg Museum in Auburn, hands down amazing.
Right.
It is
So-
the Duesenberg showroom where the cars were made. I have a thing for Duesenbergs. That's one.
I don't think. Well, Duesenbergs are awesome vehicles. For
She's
one,
a doozy.
She's a doozy.
but they don't use YKO EKs.
All right.
And
That's why
Kyle's
they
dying
run-
to
why
talk
they
about
No,
it.
I'm good. This
That's why
I
they-
knew this was gonna go like in 10 directions, and then
He knew
circle
what
back.
this was
yeah,
gonna be.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
We went from Steam.
Yep.
Sorry to cut you off.
no, you're fine.
We went from Steam. You're not allowed to talk.
Yeah, but he wasn't at the pass. I hate that cliche.
We went from Steam to Flame Ignition.
Yeah, we went from steam to flame ignition to the nuclear bomb, back to steam.
to nuclear bomb, the nuclear bomb, Warner von Braun, and then now we're back to
Somebody's going to have to ride back to town and get a shitload of dimes.
What asshole think of next?
so
Candygram from Mongo. Candygram from Mongo.
Candygram from
All right, but seriously, folks. Okay, that was our intermission.
Where's all the white women at?
Where the white women? Look at my boys. Look what I got here. Where the white women? Rape, murder, arson, rape. You said rape twice. I like rape.
Did you bring a stick of gum for everyone?
So,
What the hell's that off of?
Blazing Saddles.
Blazing Saddles. I have never seen Blazing Saddles.
Oh my, you what?
I have never seen.
Take a
Blazing.
half a bottle of nitroglycerin pills before you watch that.
I have never seen it.
what's wrong with you?
need to
But
see
I have, I have a small African American collection, but whatever.
Shit. I told them when that movie came out in '74, my friend and I rode our bicycles. We were like 13, chained them to the pole, went in, and we got in trouble for coming home late because we couldn't get on the bikes for 45 minutes. We were laughing so hard, sitting there on the curb. A cop said, "What's wrong with you guys?" Just pointed to the marquee, and he went on.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that could not absolutely be made today.
Well, I believe it.
Even 50 years ago, the whole point of Blazing Saddles is the only people in the whole movie that have any shred of sense are the black people.
Yeah, that's
All the whites are completely whacked. So that's how they got away with it then, is the fact that the black people were the only ones that were seemingly normal. The white people are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Right. Still kind of that way.
And Mel Brooks kind of threw everybody under the
yeah.
bus. He didn't. It was equal opportunity. It was like
He
we're
was
getting
the equal
everybody.
opportunity offender. He just like a shotgun blast. And that's what makes it so funny.
I go home and watch it.
Well, this got brought before you got here, because you just lost.
Sorry.
This got brought up because the local theater where I'm at in Zanesville, they have a 50th anniversary of Blazing Saddles, and we was talking about, I'm like, I want to go watch it just to see how much they cut out of it,
Right.
Because it's so if that movie was to be made today, it would be like 5 minutes long.
Oh yeah.
Because it would offend so many people.
What was the great
and it's
thing?
not even offensive. It's just
We live in a
humor.
soft ass world today.
It's just humor.
It's terrible. Yeah.
What's funny is for years and years, since Christ was a corporal, we were always told in the last scene where the guy rides off into the sunset and then the limo picks him up, that he's not wearing any pants. He's just wearing chaps.
Yeah.
And then finally, when that came out, like in 4K DVD, you zoom in a little bit.
Yep. Definitely wearing
It's a
chaps.
full moon.
Yeah, before you got here, we was quoting Blazing Saddles and Monty Python, Holy Grail.
I have never seen that one either.
Oh, my
You
Lord.
are not cultured.
What?
I'm not.
What is wrong with you?
What?
I'm muting you. But
No, he's already a mutant. He hasn't seen these movies.
I don't know which one to mute, so you're good then. All right, so ignition, electric ignition. We're only an hour in, and we're to where we wanted to be at the
We're
beginning.
following along.
We had to.
It doesn't grow in a vacuum. All these other things came along with
You
it.
have to. You're right. You can't tell the story without how it started.
First.
Yeah, well, you can't tell the story without how it
It
started.
fits in with all of this, you know.
Yeah. So
We basically have gone from electricity being very impractical, and then we decide we're going to refine a little bit.
yes,
And we're going to make it a little bit more practical. Once again, these things are driven by the market, I would say.
Correct.
So
Now we got practical electricity with shitty conductors.
That was
insulators.
Yeah, the biggest. Would you agree, Mike? The theory was there, everything was known. It was just we didn't have the products that we.
Correct. Yeah, because everybody understood that you could get a current flowing through a coil, and you could get a lengthened discharge, or you could get the step-up effect. Because a Rumkopf coil with a buzzer was to make extremely high voltages to ionize gases to study things. So, wait a minute. Why, if we got a thing jumping a gap here, why can't we make that jump a gap inside of an engine cylinder, get rid of the flame ignition, and get rid of the points that move in there, that carbon up and wear out and leak? So it's just a quick progression there that happened very quickly, like in the 1890s, I would say.
Yeah.
What I would say, too, that when we start getting better conductors, and I mean, insulation has really progressed throughout the last 100 years. I mean, even the last 50 years, it's gotten so much better, and it'll continue to get better. But some of this is, I think, driven, once again, we get a better insulator, and all of a sudden we can start mass producing it. So once again, it's like...
At a commercial, economic level.
We don't have this occurring in the laboratory. We have it like, okay, we made this, we perfected this, and we can make it better, but now we mass produce it. So once again, the market's driving this. And I think that's a lot of people don't think about the business side of it, but for some reason I'm always a little bit captivated by the business side of it. It's like, what drives this?
It drives it all.
Yeah, it drives it all.
That's just it. If you're a fool if you think that a marketing standpoint or a business mindset has not driven anything in your daily life.
It's driven it all.
That is all. Your daily life is driven by how something is marketed and how many units can be sold.
Yep.
It may not be the best thing. It's just what won out.
But that's what works.
That's what works.
As long as it works, and then you can sell it, what's wrong with it?
Like to your point, Mark, a Tesla today is we have inverters, we have three-phase motors, we have all this technology that didn't have 100 years ago. We've condensed this all down, so once again we've made it practical. Solar panels are still kind of shitty, but the inverters to convert to AC have made it a little bit more practical. So.
Well, they've been flown in space for 70 years, and there's a lot of this comes from that, because the industry is always trying to reduce launch mass and extend the life because they operate in a high radiation environment. But that all comes right down. It's like but too hot again?
Nope. Turn it up.
Oh, I keep thinking I'm too hot.
Hey, you just talk.
You're doing great.
That's what. Tell me. Oh, you just talk. Oh, I don't know if I'd do that, Vern.
6 o'clock in the morning. We'll be done
it's this web of things happening where there's crisscrosses, and sometimes there's ignition across, and something flares up into a very marketable product.
So, what would you say, since we were talking about insulators, mica and porcelain probably were the two that won out?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
that were pretty prominent throughout the history of the engines that we work with. No, we're not talking into later years in a broad spectrum, just the stuff that we're used to. You had porcelain insulators and you had mica. Mica is a naturally occurring material, correct? Mm-hmm. It's something you can go out and they mine it.
It's mined.
You can go out and mine it. Porcelain.
Sand.
Yeah. It's sand refined in some certain way, and it's magic. I don't know.
Probably heated and compressed.
If you know that, Murphy, I don't know how.
Oh, yeah. It's a powder that's heated and compressed, and it basically fuses together.
Glass.
Is it heated and compressed at the same time? Yeah. And that's okay.
They mold it, and it's very, very hot, and then they cool it, and it forms that, and it solidifies.
So that's why when it breaks, it just freaking explodes.
Yeah. There's a lot of internal
it's under so much stress on it. Yeah. Okay.
But it has very poor wearing characteristics.
Yes.
So one of the things with mica is it sheets, and it just sheets, and it just. Can I get a sub sandwich with sheets? Got my card. So you get this sliding.
Whoop.
Yeah, most people don't. Well, the West Coast guys are.
I was gonna say West Coast, like what's sheets?
Yeah.
What is sheets?
Was it shit?
It's like a Buc-ee's, but not as good.
Yeah. They're not gonna know what that is either.
I don't even know what's on the West Coast.
Personally, Buc-ee's sucks, but that's just me.
You heard it first here, folks. Kyle says Buc-ee's sucks.
Buc-ee's is an experience. I'm not saying it's
Buc-ee's
good.
Sucks. I hate
it's just
an
experience.
What don't you like about Buc-ee's?
Well, everybody raves about their barbecue.
The shitters are clean.
Well, the shitters are amazing. Okay, that's
See, I go to the truck stop to take a shit, and I can barbecue. But I'm going to get a bag of chips and Dr. Pepper, take a shit, fill the tank, and get back on the fucking road.
I know.
I go for the beef jerky wall.
Well,
It's a wall of beef jerky.
we stopped on our way to Tennessee down there in Kentucky at that Buc-ee's, and
That's what I do at Buc-ee's. They got 52 gas pumps and 52 shitters, you know?
the shitters were amazing. I will say that.
Ladies and
Everything
gentlemen
else
of the jury, I
sucked.
rest my case.
It was an
Everything
amazing
else
experience.
sucked about Buc-ee's.
Yeah, but why are you going there to eat?
I'm not. I mean, I got a sandwich because I had to feel what all the hype was about. That's the worst fucking barbecue I've ever had in my life.
It's gas station barbecue.
Go
What is
pee,
it?
terrible.
get some fuel, and leave. There's no
Basically-
trucks there. You still don't have He-Bob trying to give you $20 to back his truck into the parking spot. You get in the toilet, there's some guy in there standing on a toilet seat trying to make a chick a shit like an Arab. Buc-ee's doesn't have any trucks.
I know, but I just don't like Buc-ee's. But that's just me. But Sheetz is amazing.
Jeez.
I love it.
Where do you get Wawa?
Wawa.
Where do you get Wawa?
I've never been to a Wawa.
Oh, Wawa.
Where I'm moving to down by Hamilton, there's going to be supposedly a Wawa about a mortar shot away.
Really?
There goes my cholesterol level. Anyway,
Anyhow.
guess what? We're out in left field playing soccer again.
Yeah, shocker.
Shocker.
Buc-ee's sucks. That's why.
All right, back
Buc-ee's
to
sucks.
insulators.
Back to insulators.
Insulators. Mike,
I bought a
Buc-ee's
$42
uses
stuffed
insulators
beaver.
on the little thing that kills the
Neons,
mosquitoes outside, by the ice chest.
Right.
I would
So
like,
you're
I would
snapping and
like,
cracking because it's making a spark.
I would like somebody to make a graph of like how all this is interconnected, like where our tangents went, like a diagram.
It's called a ball of steel wool. It's three-dimensional. Hey, you wanted me to come on this thing. But he said
absolutely.
Buc-ee's suck.
I
I'm
abs-
okay with,
I absolutely wanted this to happen.
I'll correct myself. Buc-ee's sucks except for the shitters. That's all.
All right, you West Coast folks. I do love In-N-Out. And
In-N-Out burger.
and Jack's in the box.
Jack's in the box.
Jack in the box.
Never had either one of those.
It's
Well, there's
they're
two
up
down by Cincinnati. There's Jack in the Hood. See it. And there's one right along 75 at Taylorsville.
Oh, really?
It's just a nasty hamburger, but it's just a joke.
Like White Castle. I'll
Their
stand
mascot
them.
is-
Oh, the rectum rocket? You pick
Oh,
up the
yeah.
hamburger to see the pickle?
Yeah, those are great.
Well, it's a yo-yo burger. It's guaranteed to come back up.
Oh, we got now our quick trips.
Oh, yeah, I've been
That's
a
it.
Quick Trip. Yep.
It's better than come and go.
What's
that's
the
just
other
a-
one? Where's
it's
the
a
what's the other
horrible
one?
name.
Up by shit. What was it? Not Red Apple. That's upstate New York. What's the other shitty?
Casey's?
Yeah, Casey's. We got them around Ohio, and I used to go there to eat pizza when I was in Iowa. But
You want pizza with a side of grease?
no grease with a side. Well, a picture of a pizza,
Yeah.
but it works good in the rear end and the steering knuckles, or in your aorta. Jesus Christ, how are we going to get back on it? Kyle, save us.
I think we got to go back to ignition now.
Ignition.
I think ignition.
3,
No.
2.
All right, so where do you wanna go?
Ignition.
Ignition.
Liftoff.
Low tension, high tension, buzz coil.
What do you prefer? What do you guys prefer?
Buc-ee's.
Well, I kind of think here what we should go for is, and I think
Wawa.
Wawa. Ooh, yeah.
I prefer spark plugs with a Wyco EK,
That's a good
I prefer
choice.
Webster's.
but without an auto light spark plug because auto light spark plugs suck.
Oh, you're going to put a champion in there, huh?
No, it's even worse.
That's what I thought.
You're one of those NGK people, aren't you?
No, I
am.
actually like to find.
Original plugs.
Well, I mean, I
I
do
drive a
have.
Suzuki Samurai. That's the
Well-
only thing that runs good in it.
That pipe hand piece of shit I've got, I run whatever's in that book, because they're pretty touchy, those little Jappy hemispherical head engines. They're
Yep.
touchy. If it's in that book, that's what I run.
That's what you put
I
in
try
it.
to buy the old.
Suzuki Samurai. It's NGK.
Well,
Anything
I'll
else
make them little
crap.
adapters, for an 18 millimeter NGK sometimes. But like if I'm using a 1/2 inch pipe plug, I try to find the oldest ones I can and just take them apart, clean them up, use them.
You mean to take
Yeah.
apart? Yeah.
Yeah.
'cause, yeah.
I mean, because these new auto lights that you buy today, they have a coating on them, like a silver coating, and they don't ground worth a shit.
You mean on the
Well-
threads?
Yeah, they don't ground, and they're terrible, absolutely terrible.
I think a lot of it, Kyle, when you look at the old plugs, look at the porcelain and see how well refined the porcelain
Right.
and smooth it is. The auto light it's very grainy, and I've often
was gonna
thought
say,
that
it looks like sand
It
on
almost
this.
that probably aids it because
Yeah.
that's some of the problem with this old ignition is we're not burning what's in the cylinder very well, and the mixture's not very good. It's
Right.
not like today's modern stuff. It's pretty well tight, and it's
Yeah,
right.
but how many modern
Yeah.
engines today use a 1/2 inch thread spark plug.
Yeah, none of them. Yeah.
You're running that in a Model T. Collectors are using those in the Model Ts, and we're using them in the gas engine world. That's all we're using. Those half-inch
spark
pipes.
plugs went metric in World War II.
Well, yeah.
So we have 14 and 18. You're gonna get your 48 Plymouth. It's
but
it takes
still
18
they're
millimeter
still
plugs.
they're still only making them half-inch pipe thread spark plugs for the Model T, hobby and us basically. What?
Don't pound the table.
Sorry, jeez. Am I in trouble?
No, he muted you.
Okay.
Muted me too.
Did he really?
I heard
Anyway,
the side tone go
Spark
down.
plugs.
Spark plugs, yes.
But
seriously, folks,
scientific research has shown in the Blankenship Laboratory that
you heard it first here, folks. Down the street from Bucky's is
Blankenship
we're getting the Buc-ee's in Huber Heights, by the way. Well, you are.
Well, that's a friggin' mortar shop from where I'm moving out of. We got a
Anyway.
Sheets right there too.
Sheets is better.
Right there, I've got a Sheets, and I'm not going to be able to use it because I'm moving out of Huber, Kentucky.
Well, that's your own fault. Oh, sheet.
They got made MTO, made to order.
Yeah, it's badass.
It's good.
But anyway, I bought a case of a 10-pack of the new Autolite 3095s, and they were silver. And we've tried them.
You mean the plating on the metal part of the body is a
yeah.
cadmium or some sort of silvery, not the black oxide that they used to
Right.
be.
Now, the black oxide are better, but not great. But you put those in an engine, and they just don't connect. There's no... You got to clean the shit out of them.
Or they'll run for a little bit. You get them to run,
right?
and
then
you shut them down, and you go to start it back up, and I'm like, what the hell? And then you put a new plug in it, and it takes off and runs. I'm like,
and then people
what is
always
wrong with
say
this?
like, I can't get my engine to run. It ran great the other day. Well, change the spark plug. Try that. Just try that. Some people want to try the most difficult thing first. Try the easiest thing first. Mm-hmm. When you got a new collector or an older collector, whatever, dealing with a Wyco EK magneto on an engine. And they lose spark. The first thing they go, my magneto needs recharged. No bullshit. Try a different plug. The plugs could be completely shit. And
try the plug or adjust the mag because it's not tripping.
Well, even on the back of like a Wyco, you got to have that grounding surface. It's got to be grounded. It's got to make a contact.
You mean if you
circuit.
paint the bracket completely,
Yeah, it won't work worth a shit.
and
Guarantee it.
it
Promise
won't work?
No, go ahead,
What?
Avery.
Another thing on the Wycos is they rotate. If you ever grabbed one real tight, they will rotate a little bit.
Yeah.
That little rotation affects them a lot.
Yeah, no,
a lot.
That's what that was kind of what I was getting at is where you
It's only a degree.
If it
If you're
doesn't,
having troubles with it tripping that just right, you just
because
twist
the
those nuts and
holes
twist it
are
the other way.
are
It might work
a little bit
Give
oversized.
it another hit of acid, it'll trip.
Yeah, but the holes are oversized enough. If your trip mechanism is worn and the mag's cocked a little bit and it pulls a little bit cockeyed, it won't fire correctly,
Lost
or it won't
motion.
fire at all. Yeah, it won't fire at all. And I can't tell you how many times I've shown up to an engine show where I sold something to somebody and they've pulled the mag off it. I'm thinking, why did you touch it? It ran when I sold it to you.
Because the first thing that goes to their head is the worst case scenario.
Yeah, so they pull the mag off. Like, well, I sent the mag out and had it recharged. I'm like, there wasn't anything wrong with it. And then they put the mag back on, and it's cockeyed the way it came off. And I'm like, okay, well, hang on, let me loosen this up. And I look at it, and it trips evenly. And I'm like, oh, your engine runs now. Wow, you spent $400 for no reason.
That's what kind of spurred this whole thing on because I've been
What,
I know
saving people money from stupidity.
well that's a little bit of it. I try to be that kind of person, but
I'll say it.
he's not. Obviously, you're not a social media person, but I have succumbed to social media, and I'm getting to this point. Like it's like you get and you'll go on. There's a couple hit and miss sites that I go to, and it's like. It's the whole, we go down the road, it doesn't work, and it's like, oh boy, here we go again. And I hate typing. I didn't become an administrative person, didn't become an office person, because I hate typing. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm a field guy. So, you go down this whole line of stuff, it's like, well, the Spark doesn't do this, and Spark doesn't do that, and it's like, I think what we have here is, there's been a disconnect, and once again, I said this in the beginning, I'm not trying to insult anyone young in the hobby, but everyone that's probably 40, 30, and under, I would say, has Briggs, Predators, that the electrical ignition will probably work underwater because it's pretty well foul-proof. Yeah. And I think that's what gets lost in this is the fact that this is not, it makes a spark, and we beat our heads against the wall with this is, the person that says if it has a spark, it'll run, sold carburetor repair kits. Because what's the first thing that everyone does? They take the spark out, they put it on the frame, and it has a spark, and there goes the carburetor repair kit.
They always told me that the the leading cause of ignition is actually carburation or
95% of all
however it goes.
all carburetor, or 95% of all